This video was made possible thanks to Olafly, offering unlimited data for your next trip in seconds. More on that in a moment. What an end of the year we are having! The last few weeks have been truly eventful. Trump's arrival, the fall of al-Assad, the political crises in France and Germany, and what can I say about South Korea? I don't think the Koreans could ever have imagined ending 2024 like this. After attempting a coup d'etat on the 3rd of December, the president of South Korea has finally been suspended. The National Assembly has succeeded in pushing through an impeachment against President Yoon Suk Yeol, who will no longer have the powers of president.
가결되었음을 선포합니다.
VisualPolitik community, South Korea is going through an unprecedented political crisis. For those of you who don't quite understand what all the chaos is about, last Tuesday, 3rd of December, the South Korean president declared martial law completely illegally. This declaration suspended freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of political association, the right to demonstrate, and also, most importantly, the activity of the National Assembly, the South Korean parliament. In other words, the president suddenly passed a decree that basically ended South Korean democracy. Fortunately, this martial law lasted only a few hours. This was because, contrary to government orders, 190 legislators of the National Assembly managed to vote in the evening to cancel this martial law. And since the army obeyed the parliament, that was the end of it. Since then, a real political and judicial battle has been unleashed to investigate the president, the ministers involved, and the military and police commanders who collaborated in such madness. The prosecution, the National Assembly, the police, the Corruption Investigation Bureau for high-ranking officials. Everyone is investigating what happened that night. In our last video on Korea, here on VisualPolitik, we laid out the reasons that led to the president to attempt such a coup. Basically, it had to do with the lack of parliamentary support for the policies of this president, and perhaps more particularly, the scandals surrounding his wife. But if you want to know more, here's the video. The point is that in the last few days, incredible things like this have been coming to light.
South Korean minister tried to spark conflict with North as pretext for martial law.
Although it may sound unbelievable, the information available suggests that the Minister of Defense during the coup attempt, Kim Yong-hyun, who is currently in jail, even tried to provoke an armed clash with his North Korean neighbors. Why? Because then, the declaration of a state of war, that is, martial law, would have been fully justified. Crazy, but true. Be that as it may, that scenario did not occur. The coup attempt failed, and the president has lost his powers. The story is not over yet, though. The Constitutional Court will now have to validate the removal of the president within a maximum period of 6 months. If that happens, elections will be held in 60 days. And let me tell you, South Korean politics may be about to take a 180-degree turn. And if the Constitutional Court does not validate the impeachment, then the president would regain all his power, which would also cause huge chaos. And let's see, impeachment seems like a textbook solution against a coup-plotting president. But there's one problem. The law requires the Constitutional Court to validate the removal of the president with the favorable votes of 6 of its 9 members. And the issue is that, in this tribunal, there are 3 vacancies, so its resolution would have to be unanimous in order to definitively remove the president.
The Prime Minister, who is the person in South Korea who assumes the powers of the president when the president is incapacitated, might nevertheless try to expedite the appointment of new judges before sentencing. After all, this guy, Han Duck-soo, was always against the declaration of martial law. But even so, then there is another challenge. 4 of the 6 judges were appointed during Yoon's presidency, one of them by Yoon himself.
So whichever way you look at it, South Korean politics is in for a rough ride in the next coming months. Although the Constitutional Court will most likely ratify the impeachment. As I've already said, there is plenty of evidence that the president went so far overboard that he even wanted to provoke an armed clash with North Korea. Yeah, you heard correctly. VisualPolitik community, what we're about to tell you is the delirious story of how the South Korean president came close to blowing up Korean democracy. Today on VisualPolitik, we're going to answer these questions, but of course, since we'll be traveling to Korea, a problem arises. How do we manage once we're there? How do we deal with the language barrier? How do we get around the city? How do we find restaurants? How do we handle all the work emails that keep coming in? And how do we keep in touch with our friends? It's clear, we need our phones and a bunch of apps. But of course, a smartphone without internet can be as useful as a bicycle without wheels. So we also need connectivity. This happens every time we travel abroad, but do you know what? At VisualPolitik, we found the perfect solution a while ago. With Olafly, you won't have to spend a fortune on international roaming services just to stay connected on your next trip. Plus, you'll enjoy an added advantage. Thanks to its eSIM, you won't have to open your phone to insert a SIM card from another country, avoiding the risk of losing your original card. Technology's already moved way beyond that. With this virtual card, you can instantly purchase your mobile data plan in over 200 countries without interruptions. In fact, in more than 150 of them, you can enjoy unlimited data. This way, you won't have to rely on Wi-Fi or expensive rates. Simply go to their app or website, select the plan that best fits your needs, and then just install Olafly's international eSIM using a QR code or through their app, and that's it. In no time, you'll be able to explore the best places, connect with your accommodation upon arrival, or share your best moments with family and friends. Trust us, with Olafly and their unlimited data eSIMs for travel, you can stop worrying about staying connected. Just check the link in the description where you can also get a 5% discount on any plan and destination with your next purchase.
The coup plan.
This story has two main players. They were the ones who pulled the strings of this whole operation: President Yoon Suk Yeol and former Defense Minister Kim Jong-hyun. They were the ones who planned and gave the main orders to implement martial law. For this reason, the South Korean president, as well as having lost his powers, has been banned from leaving the country. And for his part, the former Defense Minister was arrested days ago. But what exactly did the president and the former Defense Minister do? Well, according to what is known so far, former Minister Kim planned much of the martial law on Yoon's orders. And it was also he himself who drew up a plan that contained such craziness as trying to provoke a war with North Korea. And the worst thing is that he had the president's approval. Now, what exactly are we talking about? Well, you see, according to the investigations that are being carried out, the coup plan was not improvised. Even though it was fortunately tremendously botched, it had been in development for months. In fact, coincidentally, last March, a military exercise was held to prepare the army for a possible declaration of martial law. An unusual exercise that was odd in military circles. But it turns out, the worst is what was to come in October, 2 months before martial law was declared. No one knew it at the time, but what was happening may have been the initial part of President Yoon and former Minister Kim's plan to suspend democracy. These two guys wanted to provoke a North Korean attack that could lead to an armed conflict. Now, how did they try to do that? Well, check out this news item from October.
North Korea accuses South of flying drones over Pyongyang. South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff did not confirm or deny the accusations.
At the time, no one made much of this news because North Korea had been launching propaganda balloons across the border for months. Many of these balloons landed in Seoul. So most people believed that this accusation was nothing more than a way for the communist dictatorship to justify itself. But North Korea confirmed having found one of the South Korean drones and released some photos. And let's see, Kim Jong-un's regime has zero credibility. But take a look at that drone. And now look at this one. This small South Korean drone was filmed at the military parade held in Seoul for Armed Forces Day on the 1st of October. And of course, the truth is that, at least visually, the drone shown by the North Koreans is similar to the South Korean one. So, were there South Korean drones flying over Pyongyang? What was the point of this? Well, logically, none. That's why many politicians said this was nothing more than a North Korean-built replica. Now, however, the story is beginning to look very different. In fact, opposition lawmaker Park Bom-ki has claimed to have information from credible military sources that the Defense Counterintelligence Command was behind this drone operation over Pyongyang in an attempt to provoke the North Korean regime. According to the same sources, this drone operation was part of a larger plan related to the declaration of martial law. The idea would be to provoke an attack by North Korea on South Korean soil as punishment for the launching of these drones over its capital, and then trigger a military response that could lead to a full-fledged armed clash. Martial law would then be declared in accordance with the provisions of the act. And remember, the idea of North Korea attacking South Korean territory is not that crazy. For instance, they already did so in 2010 with the shelling of Yeonpyeong Island, and in 2015 with the firing of shells against South Korean loudspeakers on the border. The difference is that this time, Seoul would have responded by seeking an escalation that would enable them to declare a state of war. I know it sounds crazy, but this seems to be the story. According to the testimony of this legislator we are telling you about, this whole drone scheme was allegedly hatched between former Defense Minister Kim and Lieutenant General Yo In-hyung, who was the commander of Defense Counterintelligence. And do you know what the most curious thing about this whole story is? That on Friday, 13th of December, the prosecution requested a warrant for Yo's arrest on charges of insurrection and abuse of power.
prosecutors seek arrest warrant for Defense Counterintelligence Command Chief.
According to prosecutors, as soon as martial law was declared, Yeol ordered the military to arrest ruling party leader Han Dong-hoon, who opposed martial law from the beginning, as well as opposition leader Lee Jae-myung and National Assembly Speaker Woo Won-shik. So it seems clear that this military officer participated in the coup attempt and followed the orders of the president and the former Minister of Defense. But pay attention, because this is not even all. Under questioning in Parliament, Defense Intelligence Commander Moon Sang-ho stated that on the night martial law was declared, a detention unit consisting of agents from the military intelligence unit was activated.
Intelligence Commander, on the day of martial law, 5 special agents were on alert in Pangyo. First, reconnaissance of the HID mobilization.
We're talking about a South Korean army unit specialized in infiltrating, arresting, and even assassinating North Korean leaders in case of war. In other words, the creme de la creme. Well, officers from this unit were on the alert on the night martial law was declared in Pangyo, a neighborhood south of Seoul. The reason? It's not yet known, but some legislators think the original plan was to arrest key political figures. But this is not all. Other high-ranking military commanders have testified that the president ordered them to prevent access to the National Assembly and to remove any legislators inside by any means possible. Why? So that they couldn't vote against martial law. Because under current South Korean law, the Assembly has the power to override martial law at any time. That is why President Yoon tried to prevent this from happening.
He, Yoon, said the quorum didn't appear to be met yet, so I should break down the doors and go in and drag out the people inside.
Upon hearing these orders, this lieutenant general asked the commanders who were in the National Assembly complex that night whether to storm the building by firing blanks or to cut the electricity to prevent the legislators from voting. That is, the original plan including avoiding at all costs any vote that could lift martial law, which contravenes the current legislation. Nevertheless, Yoon ran into an unexpected snag. With the soldiers already inside the building, within the National Assembly itself, the military commanders did not follow all of the president's orders.
Even if they were to go inside to execute the order, the troops involved would later become lawbreakers and too many people would be injured if they broke their way in, so I judged it wasn't right. I told them not to go inside further.
But there is still more, because the plan included not only using the army, but also the police.
National Police Chief, Seoul Police Head arrested in martial law probe.
Investigators believe that police chiefs ordered their officers to cordon off the parliament grounds to prevent lawmakers from entering the building in an attempt to overturn martial law. According to the director of the police agency, the president phoned him 6 times, ordering him to arrest the legislators, an order that fortunately also fell on deaf ears. But take note, because even military commanders called him to provide locations of opposition politicians. In short, a complete conspiracy. VisualPolitik community. It was botched, that's true. But if it had not been for the fact that many military and police commanders refused to carry out many of the orders given that night, who knows what we might be talking about right now. Luckily, many commanders disobeyed the president because they knew that what he was doing was illegal. But of course, had the coup succeeded, this would have caused them many problems. But as I said, fortunately most of them were loyal to the legislation in force, and that is what prevented the coup d'etat from succeeding. Because of all this, the impeachment has gone ahead. The president has been suspended, and everything points to his definitive dismissal coming very soon. He will probably also face tough criminal charges and end up in prison. Crazy. The question is, what now? Well, we don't have good news there either.
Bad intuitions.
Yoon Suk Yeol's political future is already decided. In a few months, there will be elections, and there is one politician who holds all the cards to become the next president of South Korea. We're talking about Lee Jae-myung. Lee is the current leader of the Democratic Party, the main opposition party, the same party that won by a landslide in the last legislative elections in April. Now, what kind of politician are we talking about exactly? Well, short answer, one that doesn't exactly look good. You see, Lee is a guy who has been splashed by a lot of scandals, and who also doesn't escape the suspicion of corruption. In fact, he even has a criminal record in this regard, and 3 trials are currently underway. Trials ranging from embezzlement to real estate corruption during his stints as mayor of Seongnam and governor of Gyeonggi province. What's more, just over a month ago, he received a conviction that could even destroy all his presidential aspirations and end his seat in the National Assembly. Everything will depend on what happens with his appeal in the Supreme Court.
South Korean opposition leader gets a suspended jail term for violating election law. The ruling could potentially unseat Lee as a lawmaker and deny him a shot at running for president in the next election.
Now, who is Lee really, and what are his plans for South Korea if he eventually becomes president? Lee's Korea would be more left-leaning, much more anti-Japanese, much more pro-Chinese, less pro-American, and would be totally opposed to helping Ukraine with weapons. Lee has even become known as nothing less than the Bernie Sanders of South Korea. He's a strong advocate of reducing the influence of the chaebol, of increasing regulations, raising taxes, and increasing government spending to stimulate the economy. Yes, this guy is considered a full-blown advocate of neo-Keynesianism. He has even been proposing for years to create a universal basic income and to raise pensions at full speed, despite news like this.
Korea says its pension fund will run dry by 2056 if no reform.
And don't forget that we're talking about the country with the lowest birth rate in the world and one of the most rapidly aging countries in the world. But this guy doesn't care about all that. Even so, his most controversial positions are those that have to do with international politics, starting with his refusal to support the improvement in relations with Tokyo that the country has experienced in recent years. Yes, Lee is one of those guys who still thinks in a 1940s mindset when it comes to his Japanese neighbor. He's even opposed to closer military cooperation with Japan, thus scuttling all the efforts of recent years. In fact, one of the great successes of the Biden administration was precisely to get Seoul and Tokyo to agree to cooperate much more closely. This is something that Washington sees as crucial to countering the growing military clout of China and North Korea. But of course, we're talking about a candidate who also argues that we need to start looking more to Beijing and less to Washington. VisualPolitik community, despite such a letter of intent, as I said, it's most likely that if the Supreme Court does not prevent it, when elections are held, Lee will win them by a landslide. Yoon Suk Yeol has caused terrible damage to the Conservatives. First for his inability to reach agreements, second for his wife's constant scandals, and third for the attempted coup d'etat. The result is that the People's Power Party is currently without a leader and remains divided. Its only viable alternative seems to be this guy, Ahn Cheol-soo, a much more moderate politician who enjoys quite a good reputation and was the first in his party to vote in favor of impeachment against Yoon, a potential candidate who also became a millionaire thanks to Ahn Lab, an antivirus software development company he founded. If they want to have any chance, they should give him the keys to the party as soon as possible. But even so, they would still have a very difficult time. Everything indicates that there will be a major political turnaround in Korea in a few months. VisualPolitik community, the original plan for the coup attempt was sheer madness. It might even have led the country into a war. Fortunately, Kim Jong-un didn't wake up in a bad mood that morning. Otherwise, we don't know how far this operation would have escalated. Of course, as you know, on VisualPolitik, we will follow everything that happens very closely. South Korea is a country that, for one reason or another, our team visits frequently, so we will be keeping an eye on it. But for now, if you found this video interesting, don't forget to give it a like and subscribe to VisualPolitik if you haven't already done so. As always, thank you very much for being there. All the best. See you next time.